The cleverest trap is the one that looks like a gift, until the moment you touch it. They thought this was their masterpiece. They thought they had built something so perfect, so convincing, that you'd walk straight in, smiling without a single question in your mind. They dressed it up in politeness, wrapped it in opportunity, and coated it with just enough sweetness to rot the teeth of anyone who bit into it. Now imagine this for a moment, chosen one. A spider doesn't just spin a web anywhere. It studies its prey. It chooses the right corner, the right light, the right timing. It makes the silk look harmless, even beautiful. That's exactly what they did with you. They designed a situation so precise, so rehearsed, that they were already celebrating your fall before you'd even stepped in. Here's the fact they didn't count on. People who've been through storms don't mistake thunder for fireworks. You've lived through enough to see patterns before they form. Psychology confirms it. When a person develops sharp observation skills through hardship, their brain becomes wired to pick up danger before it becomes visible. You weren't just looking at what they showed you, you were sensing the current beneath it. That tiny shift in their tone, that too perfect coincidence, the way their generosity felt like a sales pitch instead of kindness. Every detail screamed, "This is bait." And that's why you didn't just avoid the trap. You made them watch as you walked around it, smiling. You didn't give them the reaction they wanted. No panic, no confusion. Just that unsettling calm that says, "I've been watching you the whole time." That's what's eating them alive now. Not that you escaped, but that you saw them for exactly what they are. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe to help spread this message to more souls. It's the responsibility of all of us to spread the light. And thank you, chosen one, for being part of this mission. You are part of a force. Now let's get into it, because this wasn't just any setup. This was a carefully engineered takedown attempt. They studied you like a blueprint, thinking they could predict your moves. But they forgot one thing. You are not predictable. You don't operate by their rules. While they were plotting in the dark, you were collecting silent receipts. While they were whispering behind doors, you were already 10 steps ahead. They were so sure this was going to be their victory, but what they actually built was their own exposure. They had a perfect plan until you read between the lines. And that, chosen one, is where the real fury begins. So, are you ready to walk with me through this step by step? Because what I'm about to break down isn't just another story. It's the blueprint of the trap they thought would end you, and the exact moment you flipped it back on them. If you're a true chosen one, you'll feel that pull in your chest telling you to stay until the end, because every detail will confirm exactly why you were right to trust your instincts. And I want you to drop the number 777 in the comments if you know you've outplayed someone who thought they were 10 moves ahead. That's our silent way of letting each other know. We see through illusions, we survive the setups, and we turn their plans into lessons. And as you listen, imagine their faces when they realized you weren't caught. You were watching. So don't just hear this. Chosen one. Study it. Because the same tricks they use this time, they'll try again. And the more you know their patterns, the faster you'll cut through them. All right, let's get into it and break this whole thing wide open. Number one, they took your silence for stupidity, but you were building the case that will haunt them forever. Some people think you're blind because you don't flinch, not knowing you've already memorized their every move. They saw the way you stood back, letting them talk, letting them move, letting them fill the air with their shiny little performances, and they thought you were slow. They mistook your stillness for ignorance, your empathy for gullibility, your patience for weakness. In their mind, you were the perfect target, soft enough to mold, quiet enough to control, trusting enough to walk straight into the role they'd scripted for you. But here's what they never realized. You weren't just hearing them. You were reading them. Not just their words, but the blueprint beneath their words. Every fake smile, every unnecessary over-explanation, every coincidence that seemed just a little too convenient, you were cataloging it all in real time. Your mind was working like an architect dismantling a building in your head, brick by brick, tracing the beams and bolts until you knew exactly how it was held together. Now imagine this for a moment. Chosen one. A hawk doesn't scream the moment it spots its prey. It circles quietly, studying the rhythm, the patterns, the escape routes. It waits until the moment there is no escape, and then it strikes. That's exactly what you did. You weren't about to waste your energy on petty reactions or half-baked accusations. You knew they'd twist it, deny it, and paint you as unstable if you moved too soon. So you let them keep talking, keep smiling, keep stacking the rope that they'd eventually hang themselves with. Here's the truth psychology backs up. Those who have endured manipulation before become hyper-attuned to micro-expressions, subtle shifts, and the emotional leaks that give away a lie. You were clocking every single one. The flicker in their eyes when you mentioned certain topics. The way their voice tightened when you asked a question they didn't see coming. The little rehearsed kindnesses that felt more like bait than genuine care. You saw the net long before they tried to throw it. And maybe at some point you even questioned yourself. Am I overthinking this? Could I be wrong? But every new detail confirmed it. No, you weren't wrong. You were right all along. And that's why you stayed calm. That's why you smiled. Because you knew that in the end, their own actions would be the proof no one could deny. They thought they were reading you. They didn't realize you were reading them with the precision of someone who had already studied the game. They were studying your behavior. You were studying their soul. And here's the part that really cuts deep for them. When you finally made your move, you didn't just call out one small slip-up. You revealed the entire architecture of their deception. It wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic. It was surgical. You dismantled their story with such precision that there was nothing left for them to defend. And that's why they're furious now. Not because you caught them in a single lie, but because you saw the whole machine, the whole strategy, the whole playbook they'd been using, maybe even on others before you. You didn't just stop their attack. You exposed their entire operation. That terrifies them. Because now they have to wonder, if you caught this, what else do you know? What other secrets are you keeping, waiting for the exact moment to bring them to light? They underestimated you in the most fatal way. They believed silence was ignorance, but your silence was preparation. Your patience wasn't weakness, it was precision. And when a chosen one decides to act, it's already too late for the enemy to hide. They thought you were playing checkers while they played chess, but they didn't realize you were building a map of the entire board in your mind. You weren't reacting to their moves. You were predicting them. And when you finally made your move, it wasn't just checkmate. It was game over. Now they're left pacing, second-guessing everything they said, replaying every moment you were around them, wondering how much you caught. And that's the sweetest part of all. They'll never truly know the full extent of what you saw. They'll only know this: you saw enough. Number 2, you let them build their own cage, then lock the door from the outside. Sometimes the smartest move isn't to stop the show, it's to let the curtain rise so everyone sees the villain in full light. They thought you didn't see it. They thought you were wandering straight into their perfect little setup, eyes wide, heart open, completely unaware. What they didn't know is that you'd been watching the pieces fall into place since the first move. Every false smile, every coincidental encounter, every word that carried one meaning on the surface and another beneath it, you saw it all. And you made the decision only the truly strategic ever make. Let it finish. Imagine this, chosen one. You see a spider building its web in the corner of the room. You could destroy it instantly, sweep it away before it's done. But you don't. You let it spin. You let it invest its time, its energy, its entire plan into that web. Because you know the moment it's done, the entire structure will be visible to anyone with eyes. That's how you treated them. You didn't rush in to interrupt the weaving. You let them work themselves into a place where there'd be no escape when the truth finally hit. Exposure requires completion. If you cut it off too early, they can rewrite the script. They can say it never happened. They can play innocent, claim you misunderstood, even turn it back on you. You're being paranoid. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. And deep down, you knew they'd done this before, to others. maybe even to you. That's why you made a different choice this time. You let the trap build itself until it was too solid to deny. Imagine a chess game, chosen one. You see their plan forming, the way they're moving pieces, lining up the attack. Most people would panic and start blocking moves desperately. But you let them take what they think are easy wins. You let them get cocky. You let them believe the board is theirs. All the while you're 3 moves ahead, waiting for the exact moment their king is exposed with nowhere to go. The easiest way to defeat an enemy is to let them believe they're winning until the moment they can't move at all. That's exactly why you didn't step in early. You were collecting proof, not the kind that disappears when someone deletes a text, but the kind that's written in behavior, in patterns, in a sequence of events so precise that no amount of excuses could erase it. You were building a case that would stand on its own, with or without your words. And maybe there were moments where you felt that urge, that spark in your chest that said, I should call this out right now. But then you asked yourself, what would that really do? Would it stop them? Or would it just give them the chance to hide it better? You already knew the answer. Calling them out too early would only help them sharpen their lies. And you weren't about to hand them that advantage. So you stayed silent, not in weakness, not in fear, but in mastery. You didn't interrupt their performance. You let the full plot unfold. And the beauty of that choice? By the time the final act arrived, their mask wasn't just slipping, it was shattered. Everyone could see the cracks, the fake concern, the sudden generosity that didn't match their eyes, the way their body betrayed their words. It was all there, undeniable, in plain sight. Imagine you're watching a thief on security cameras. You could rush in the moment they step into the store. Or you could let them keep going, let them touch everything, leave fingerprints everywhere, fill their pockets until there's no way to deny it later. That's what you did. You didn't stop them at the door. You let them leave a trail so thick even they couldn't sweep it clean. Sometimes the rope you hand them is the rope they hang themselves with. And, oh chosen one, you handed them rope without them even realizing it. Every conversation you let slide, every suspicious action you didn't immediately confront, every smile you returned, knowing it was laced with poison. That was you quietly saying, go ahead, keep going. And here's where the fury burns them the most. Because now, when it's all over, there's no undoing it. They can't delete what everyone saw. They can't erase the pattern. They can't twist the sequence of events to make it look like your imagination. It's too detailed, too calculated, too obvious. Their hands are stained, and no amount of scrubbing will make them clean again. Now they're replaying it all in their head, wondering when you knew. Was it from the start? Was it halfway through? Did you overhear something they didn't want you to hear? That uncertainty is eating them alive. And the answer? You knew earlier than they'll ever believe. You knew before they even thought you were suspicious. And you knew exactly how to make sure their exposure was total. While they were setting the stage for your fall, they were unknowingly putting the spotlight on themselves. Every step they thought you were taking toward the trap was actually a step they were taking toward their own undoing. And when the collapse came, you didn't scramble. You didn't beg. You didn't fight to stay. You walked out calm, clear, unshaken, while they stood in the ruins of their own making, choking on guilt they can't explain, clutching evidence they can't delete, and staring at a story they can no longer control. And that chosen one is what drives them insane. Not just that you escaped, not just that you saw through them, but that you let them finish. You let them think they were winning all the way to the end. You let them taste the illusion of victory before you pulled it from their hands and left them holding nothing but the truth about themselves. Now, every time they think of you, they won't remember a naive victim. They'll remember the mirror they couldn't crack, the silence they couldn't read, the player they underestimated until it was too late. And the worst part? You were the one holding the script the entire time. Number 3, they built a trap for your ghost, but you walked in as someone they couldn't touch. They can only trick the version of you that no longer exists. They thought they knew you. They thought they had the blueprint to your weakness, the recipe to your downfall. The exact buttons to push to make you bend like you used to. They weren't guessing. They were aiming at a version of you they had seen before. The you that once tolerated disrespect in the name of love. The you that stayed silent just to avoid conflict. The you that swallowed every red flag because starting over felt heavier than staying. That's the person they designed this trap for. But here's the truth that shattered their plan. That person is gone. You didn't send out an announcement. You didn't give them a chance to adapt. You evolved quietly behind closed doors. You built walls where there used to be open gates. You rewired your mind so that pain no longer softened you into compliance. It sharpened you into discernment. The very storms they put you through trained you to spot their kind a mile away. Imagine this for a moment. A thief breaks into a house using the same path they've used before, only to find steel bars where there used to be a door. That was them. They came prepared for your old patterns, only to slam face first into your new boundaries. Growth makes old tricks useless. While they were polishing their same tired tactics, false promises, guilt trips, fake loyalty, emotional bait, you were living with updated armor. The words that once hooked you now sound hollow. The guilt that once chained you now makes you laugh. The emotional pleas that once swayed you now read like a bad script you've already seen. And when you didn't respond the way they counted on, the whole structure of their plan collapsed. They expected the emotional, over-forgiving, self-blaming version of you. They were counting on the person who would have explained herself, apologized unnecessarily, and twisted into knots to make everyone comfortable but herself. But that person? A ghost. They set the trap for who you were. You showed up as who you've become. That's why their rage is mixed with confusion. They didn't just fail. They failed against a power they didn't even know you had. And deep down they know. You didn't escape because of luck. You escaped because you've outgrown every chain they once used to hold you. Number 4, they fired bullets from your past, but you shielded yourself with the strength they never saw. They can't defeat the version of you that studied your scars before they did. They thought they were smart, chosen one. They dug through your history like scavengers looking for sharp objects to throw. Childhood pain, insecurities you once wore on your sleeve. Every time you trusted too fast. Every mistake you made before you knew better. They treated your life like a catalog of weaknesses, convinced that pressing on those same wounds would make you react exactly as you did before. Imagine this. Someone tries to use an old key to open your door, only to find you've changed the entire lock. That's exactly what happened here. They came armed with the data of your past, thinking you were still running on the same system. They didn't realize you'd rebuilt yourself, not patched over, not temporarily fixed, but reconstructed from the ground up with foundations they never took the time to understand. The trap failed because you're no longer powered by the pain they counted on. While they were studying how to trigger you, you were studying yourself with a different intention. Not to manipulate, but to heal. They knew the old you who needed closure. The one who would have waited for their apology like oxygen. But you've outgrown that. You've stopped chasing explanations and started living in peace without them. That shift? Completely invisible to their eyes because they only watched your actions, not your evolution. They weaponized the version of you that once needed validation, support, and love from outside sources. But they ignored the part of you that learned to provide all of that for yourself. They didn't see the quiet foundation you built, the kind of stability that doesn't crumble when someone walks away. So when they came expecting tears, you gave them calm. When they came expecting an argument, you gave them silence. Not the weak kind, but the kind that terrifies people who can't control you. And that's what broke them. They loaded their weapons with everything they thought would work. You stood there, untouched, holding the strength they never studied. They used what they thought they knew. You won with what they never bothered to learn. And that's why, no matter how sharp their weapon looked, it couldn't cut through who you've become. Number 5, you didn't just outsmart the players. You dragged the puppet masters into the light. When you trace the strings, you don't just see the puppet, you see the hands controlling it. They thought the battle was between you and them. They thought the game would stay small, personal, easy to control. But while they were busy baiting you with petty insults, false kindness, and emotional traps, you were doing something they never planned for. You were pulling the thread. And when you followed it back, you realized this wasn't just about one or two toxic people. This was an operation. Imagine this. You're in a theater and someone is trying to distract you with a loud, flashy actor on stage. Most people would focus on the performance. But you leaned back, looked past the lights, and saw the shadow in the wings. The director whispering lines, giving cues, orchestrating every move. That's what you did here. You didn't just see their actions. You saw the source behind them. The timing was too perfect, the patterns too familiar, the coincidences too convenient. It stopped feeling random and started feeling designed. Certain people appeared exactly when they needed to, saying the same empty lines you'd heard from others before. The repetition was the giveaway. This wasn't original thought. This was programming. Some people aren't thinking for themselves. They're running someone else's script. Whether it was deep jealousy, family dysfunction, generational bitterness, or wounds they never healed, they became perfect carriers for manipulation. They thought they were moving freely, but you could see it. They were pawns being nudged into place. That's why the attacks felt so precise. They weren't guessing. They were being fed the answers to the test. And here's where you broke the cycle. You stopped reacting emotionally and started analyzing strategically. You quit looking at the surface insult and started asking, who sent you? You weren't afraid to follow the trail. And when you did, the mask slipped. You saw the handlers. You saw the forces that had been monitoring your life long before these people even stepped into it. Once you see the puppeteer, the whole performance loses power. That's why they're not just angry now. They're terrified. You didn't just dodge their trap. You saw the entire network working behind them. And when you've seen the source, you can never be fooled by the puppet again. Number 6, they built a Broadway act, but you had the ending memorized before the first line was spoken. A liar's greatest weakness is thinking you don't already know the ending. They thought they were the stars of this grand production. Every move was choreographed. Every sentence was scripted. Every fake smile, every well-timed tear, every exaggerated show of support, all part of a role they had been perfecting for weeks, maybe months. They wore the mask of the victim, the hero, the loyal friend. But behind the velvet curtains, they were quietly setting the stage for your downfall. To the casual observer, it looked flawless, convincing, believable. But here's where they underestimated you. You already had the script before opening night. You knew every plot twist before they delivered their first line. Your intuition had already whispered the truth in 100 little ways. In the pit of your stomach, in the sudden stillness of your spirit, in dreams that felt too sharp to ignore. You didn't need physical evidence at first. The confirmation was already woven into your instincts. Imagine this. You're watching a magician's act, but you already know where the trapdoor is, where the assistant is hiding, and how the illusions are done. You don't gasp when the trick happens. You just watch, knowing the crowd will figure it out later. That's what you did here. You saw the props. You saw the planted evidence. You caught the rehearsed conversations. And instead of interrupting their performance, you gave them the stage. Not because you were powerless, but because you knew reacting too early would give them the opportunity to twist the plot and recast themselves as the hero. When you know the truth, silence becomes strategy. So you let them have their audience. You let them burn themselves out performing for the crowd while you stood off stage, already emotionally checked out. Every dramatic scene they acted out only tightened the noose of their own story. And when the curtain finally fell, there was no need for you to explain, defend, or beg for understanding. The truth had its own timing. The evidence spoke for itself. They wanted applause at the end, but you didn't give them the satisfaction. No clapping, no closing speech, just you walking away from their stage entirely. Because the moment you saw the script, you knew you were never meant to be part of their play. Number 7, you let the snake think it was safe, then you cut the head clean off. Patience isn't weakness. It's the sharpest blade you can carry. The shift was instant. The air got heavier. The tone in their voice wasn't the same. The energy they carried began to buzz with something sour. The silence between certain words stretched just a little too long. Most people would have brushed it off as nothing. But you knew. You didn't need to see the whole betrayal to recognize the scent of it in the air. That awareness, it wasn't paranoia. It was a survival instinct sharpened by everything you've lived through. But instead of calling it out right then, you chose something far more dangerous to them. You stayed still. You let them come closer. You gave them the illusion that you were unaware, that they had you right where they wanted you. And that's the mistake they'll never forget. They mistook your silence for submission, your stillness for fear. They didn't realize you were counting the beats, watching the patterns, letting them get so close that when you struck, it would be final. Imagine this, a snake in the grass, confident that its prey hasn't noticed. It coils tighter, believing the kill is moments away. But what it doesn't see is that the prey has been watching the whole time, not frozen in fear, but waiting for the exact second to make the cut clean. You weren't running on emotion. You weren't reacting to every flicker of deceit. You were studying, tracking, measuring, watching how they coordinated with others, catching the slip in their tone, clocking every false move without announcing you'd seen it. And while they thought they were tightening their grip, you were locking in on the exact place to sever it. The goal isn't to strike first, it's to strike right. You didn't need to yell. You didn't need to warn them. You didn't even need them to admit anything. You let the net close in just enough that when you acted, their entire structure collapsed in one clean motion. And that's what left them stunned. One calculated move from you undid months of their scheming. While they were depending on your emotions, you were sitting on strategy. You weren't asleep. You were patient. And when the light finally hit the truth, you didn't just step away from the snake. You ended it. Number 8. They bet on your silence, but you spoke with a sword called truth. Silence protects the guilty far more than the innocent. They were sure you'd never open your mouth. They believed your kindness was a lock they could trust, that you'd swallow every truth, bury every detail, and protect their reputation at the expense of your own peace. And for a while, you did exactly what they expected. You gave them grace they didn't deserve. You told yourself it wasn't worth the drama. You let things slide in the name of keeping the peace, but deep down you knew the peace wasn't real. It was camouflage. For them, not for you. Every time you bit your tongue, they hid more comfortably behind your loyalty. They weaponized your good heart, turning it into a shield for their bad behavior. They didn't just think you wouldn't speak. They were sure of it. Because to them, you were too moral, too loyal, too afraid of conflict to ever risk exposing what you knew. But here's where they miscalculated. Kindness and silence are not the same thing. And the day you realized that protecting someone's wrongdoing made you an accomplice to it, that was the day the game shifted. That was your awakening. Imagine this, a house on fire, and you've been keeping quiet because you don't want to disturb the neighbors. But then you realize your silence isn't stopping the flames, it's helping them spread. That's when you grab the alarm and let it scream. You stop caring about preserving their image. You stop protecting people who would never protect you. You stop calling it loyalty when it was really self-betrayal. You started standing in truth, even if it meant standing alone. And here's what shook them the most. You didn't expose them out of rage. You did it with calm, with certainty, with unshakable clarity. You let the truth speak for itself. No dramatics, no shouting match, just facts laid bare, undeniable. And the truth did what it always does. Stripped away every mask they were hiding behind. They counted on your silence. They built their safety net out of it. But when you cut that net, they fell hard. Because in the end, it wasn't your words that destroyed them. It was the reality they'd been running from, finally catching up. Number 9, they tried to light your fuse, but ended up setting themselves on fire. The loudest proof of strength is when you don't react to what was designed to break you. They threw everything they could at you. Subtle jabs, carefully chosen words meant to reopen old wounds, sly digs in public that were disguised as jokes, and enough passive aggression to choke a room. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a calculated push. They wanted to make you snap. They wanted to catch you mid-reaction, to turn your emotions into their evidence. They weren't just hoping to hurt you. They were baiting you for the kill shot to your reputation. They were already rehearsing the story. See? That's the real them. All they needed was a scene, some chaos, an outburst they could replay to everyone who would listen. But you didn't give them that. You saw the setup for what it was. You recognized the trap in their timing, the smirk behind their words, the way they waited for your pulse to rise. And instead of letting them pull you into the performance, you gave them nothing. No rage, no crack in your voice, no slip in your composure. Self-control isn't weakness, it's a weapon. And yours cut deeper than any insult could. Because while they were expecting the old version of you, the one who might have taken the bait, they ran into the healed version, the one who's removed the triggers they thought they could pull. The moment you stayed calm, the dynamic shifted. Your piece turned into a mirror, reflecting their tactics back at them for everyone to see. The more you stayed centered, the more they started to unravel. Their voice got sharper. Their words got sloppy. Their stories started contradicting themselves. They were waiting for you to make a fool of yourself, but they ended up doing it instead. What was meant to be your public undoing became their public exposure. You didn't need to scream, accuse, or plead your case. Your restraint forced them to reveal themselves. And that's what eats them alive. You didn't just win the moment. You flipped the script entirely. They came to frame you as the villain, but now they're the ones standing under the spotlight, squirming under the truth they wrote with their own hands. Number 10. They wrote the ending in ink, but you tore out the last page. The plot they planned for you became the plot twist that buried them. They thought they had your story locked. Every beat, every scene, every emotional breakdown was already mapped out in their mind. The betrayal wasn't an accident. It was staged. The whispers weren't random. They were planted. The coincidences that lined up against you weren't fate. They were timed for maximum damage. Their goal? To make the final act your collapse, your humiliation, your public unraveling. They wanted the breakdown, the tears, the isolation, the moment where you'd look exactly like the villain or the fool they'd been painting you to be. They were counting on you to follow their script to the letter. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot the story wasn't actually theirs to finish. Imagine this: a director yelling, "Action!" only for the actors to start improvising lines that flipped the entire scene. That's what happened. Right when they thought the climax was coming, the whole narrative bent in another direction. People they had convinced to turn on you began hesitating, sensing the holes in their story. Opportunities they swore were dead for you came back to life, not in spite of their sabotage, but because of it. Sometimes the fire set to burn you down is the same fire that forges you into steel. The pain they weaponized became your training ground. Instead of folding under it, you grew sharper, wiser, more unshakable. What they tried to bury rose up in plain sight, and the very lies they spread began crumbling under the weight of reality. They assumed that designing the setup meant owning the ending, but you proved something they never accounted for. No scheme can outlast alignment. No sabotage can override the momentum of someone who refuses to break. While they were busy directing a downfall, you were busy rewriting the script. And when the curtain fell, you weren't on the floor. You were standing, steady, with the kind of poise they can't explain. The ending they planned didn't just fail, it vanished. And now the only thing people remember is that you walked away stronger than when the scene began, leaving them trapped in the wreckage of a story that backfired in their own hands. Number 11. You weren't sent to break. You were sent to keep the receipts they couldn't shred. Sometimes you're not the target, you're the witness they can't silence. They thought you were dropped into their chaos to be swallowed by it. They thought the weight of the setup would crush you, that the betrayal would shatter your focus, that you'd lose yourself in the mess they created. But the truth, you were never meant to fall there. You were placed there to see, to document, to remember. From the outside, it looked like an ambush, but on the inside, you began to notice the pattern. This wasn't just random cruelty. This was an operation. And while they thought they were keeping you in the dark, every lie was another piece of evidence. Every betrayal revealed another hidden alliance. Every silent bystander showed you exactly where their loyalty ended. Imagine this, being sent undercover, not to stop the first crime, but to learn the entire system from the inside out. That's what you were doing, quietly mapping the structure, noting who moved where, recognizing the unspoken agreements that allowed the poison to flow undetected. You weren't just surviving. You were gathering the kind of truth that doesn't fade, even if the words are denied later. Your memory became the record they couldn't erase. That's why you didn't shake the way they expected. You understood that this wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation. You weren't asking, why me, anymore. You were thinking, of course me, because I can carry this without breaking. You realized you were never the casualty. You were the witness. And when the time came, your presence alone would testify louder than any document. You didn't need screenshots. You didn't need recordings. You are the receipt. Your healing is proof. Your survival is evidence. Your elevation is the undeniable exhibit that the trap failed. They wanted to bury you in the mess. Instead, you walked out with the map. And now, whether you speak or stay silent, they know. You saw it all. And that truth will follow them longer than any words you could ever say. Number 12. You smiled at the snare, and they knew the hunt was over. Nothing unsettles a schemer more than the smile of someone who's already read their ending. They thought they had you perfectly boxed in. Every piece was in position. The rumors planted, the distractions lined up, the fake allies stationed close enough to report back. From their perspective, you were walking straight into their design, step by step. They were waiting for the crack, the panic in your voice, the confusion in your eyes, the frantic move that would confirm their power over you. But you didn't give them any of that. You smiled. And it wasn't the smile of someone clueless or naive. It was the smile of someone who saw every moving part, every hidden hand, and decided to meet it with peace instead of panic. That single expression rattled them harder than any confrontation could, because they built their plan on the assumption that fear would be your undoing. But fear never showed up. Imagine this, a chess player so sure they've cornered your king, only to see you leaning back in your chair with that calm, knowing grin. The one that says you've been planning a checkmate they never even saw coming. Your smile said what words didn't need to. I see you. I see all of it. And you are not in control here. That quiet certainty made their stomach turn, because it told them the truth they didn't want to face. This was never going to end the way they planned. Calm in the middle of chaos is the loudest form of defiance, and your calm wasn't passive. It was tactical. It was you refusing to let them script your reaction, refusing to hand them the satisfaction of watching you crumble. That smile was your signal, not just to them, but to yourself, that the ending was already yours. When they saw that confidence on your face, they realized the game had been lost long before they thought it was over. And that's the part that will keep haunting them. The memory of you, standing in the middle of their storm, smiling like you'd already seen the sun coming. Number 13. You felt the storm before they even saw the clouds forming. Energy shifts before words betray, and those who are awake always feel it first. You didn't need a text, a confrontation, or a witness to tell you something was wrong. Long before the first act of betrayal hit the surface, you felt it ripple underneath. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But you caught it. The subtle shift that most people miss. A pause in conversation that didn't belong. A tone that landed colder than it should have. A silence that once felt safe, now sitting heavy with unspoken weight. They hadn't moved against you yet, but the connection was already fractured. And you knew something they didn't. Betrayal doesn't begin with action. It begins with intention. By the time they were ready to act, the seed had already been planted in their heart. Imagine this, standing outside on a calm day, and suddenly the wind changes. No one else notices, but you feel it in your bones. A storm is coming. That's what it was like. While they thought they were hiding it, masking their shift with rehearsed warmth, You were already reading the current beneath their words. Your awareness gave you the one thing they never planned for: time. Time to step back, time to detach, time to reinforce your peace before the blow arrived. So when the mask finally slipped, you weren't scrambling. You weren't blindsided. You had already grieved the connection in private, and that's why it didn't destroy you. You'd already accepted the truth in your spirit before it appeared in the physical. By the time they acted, you were already standing in a place they couldn't shake, a place of clarity, distance, and strength they never saw coming. Number 14, they're not just angry you survived. They're angry you made their master plan look pathetic. The deeper they plan your fall, the harder it is for them to accept when you're still standing. This wasn't a quick jab or a heat-of-the-moment betrayal. No, this was precision work. They designed it like an architect of destruction. Every lie was handpicked. Every rumor was placed with care. Every fake smile was perfectly rehearsed. They built this thing to last, certain it would be the final chapter in your story. They weren't aiming for a bruise. They wanted a knockout. They pictured you unraveling in front of everyone. They wanted whispers to spread faster than truth, so that by the time you tried to defend yourself, the damage would already be permanent. They wanted isolation, humiliation, collapse. In their mind, the ending was already written. You'd fade and they'd stand over the ruins. But then, nothing went according to their script. Imagine this. Someone spends months setting up the perfect trap, only to watch you stroll through it without a scratch, as if you knew the blueprint all along. That's what happened. Instead of panicking, you stayed still. Instead of fighting the lies head on, you let them eat themselves from the inside. You didn't need to swing wildly. You let time, truth, and consistency dismantle the entire performance. And here's the part that burns them. Their failure isn't quiet. Every time you show up, every time you succeed, every time you smile in public, it's another reminder that they wasted all that energy for nothing. They didn't just fail to break you, they failed to even shake you. They studied your past, but your growth blindsided them. They built their plan around the person you used to be, the one without boundaries, the one still figuring out their strength. But you've upgraded, evolved, sharpened. You don't walk into the same traps twice. Now, the very thing they crafted to destroy you stands as proof of who they are, and proof of who you've become. You didn't just survive it, you turned it into evidence. You didn't just escape. You walked out stronger, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own overconfidence. And that, chosen one, is a loss they'll taste every single time they think of you. And so, chosen one, what was meant to trap you only proved your strength, your clarity, and your growth. Every move they made became proof that you can't be broken by schemes, no matter how carefully they're built. You walked through the fire and came out untouchable, and that's a story worth telling. So if this message resonated with you, show your support by hitting like, subscribing, and dropping the number 777 in the comments as our code for victory. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because light spreads fastest when we pass it on.